Hi everybody, I'm Anna McKerrow and this is my Magical People series. And today I'm here with Mat Auryn. Hi Matt.
Hi, Anna. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining me, well, this evening, today for you. um, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. So my name is Mat Auryn. I am a recently published author, but I have been blogging and writing for magazines and websites and book anthologies for a long time. Until recently, until the book, which is why I wrote the book, I was a professional psychic for many, many years, kind of based in Salem, Massachusetts, which
Mm.
is sort of the witchy heart of the United States. And yeah, I've been teaching workshops and various things of that nature, which I eventually was like, I'm just going to write a book, so I can teach people in a broader sense, and I don't have to keep giving people
Mm.
readings. I
Mm.
can teach people how to read for themselves.
Yeah.
I'm an initiate in several different esoteric traditions, including different branches of witchcraft. And yeah, I mean, this is just the stuff I geek out on. So.
I love that. Um, okay, amazing. So I'm gonna show you a book now actually. So this is Matt's book. It's called Psychic Witch. Tell us a little bit about this, Matt, because this will probably take us into what you're all about in your approach.
Okay. So one of the reasons I wrote Psychic Witch is partially because I was not satisfied with the books on psychic ability on the market.
Mm.
A lot of them are very flowery in like they'll talk a lot about it, but they won't really tell you how to do it, other than maybe a couple of vague exercises.
Okay. Mm.
So there's that on one hand, and then on the other hand, I have found with several of my students, and then several interactions, because, like I said, my whole life is this stuff, right? So I'm
Hmm.
constantly meeting different types of witches. I have found within their practices and within modern witchcraft publications, there isn't an emphasis on psychic ability like there used to be. There used to be this
Mm.
emphasis of you develop the inner stuff and then you start working with the outer stuff.
Mm.
So I wrote this book to try to bridge those back together. I started kind of assuming that the reader knows nothing about either of those worlds, psychic or witchcraft, and try to build them up to a full-on practice without using any tools or anything other than the power of your mind, your body, and your spirit.
Mm. And that's quite unusual from a witchcraft perspective, anyway. It is unusual because
Mm.
usually we would, if you were coming to it, you might find a kind of a how-to book, and one of the first things it would say is, okay, you need this stuff.
Right.
So you need the black candle and the white candle and the cup and all of these other things. So I like that in a way that we don't have any of that,
Yeah.
because it's quite, yeah, carry on.
And like I am all about using those things. I'm all
Mm.
about tools. I love candles. I love traditional spellcraft and the traditional tools and stuff. But if you don't know how to connect with it, if you don't know how to invoke its power, essentially, other than going through the motions, you're not going to get as strong of results. In my early spell casting, before I did dive into the energy work and the psychic opening and stuff of that nature, my spells were either hit or miss. But once I could figure out how to channel that energy and also how to sense if that energy was occurring. So one of the things I talk about often with people is you can sort of tell how a spell or ritual is going as you open up your psychic ability. So for me and for my students, if they cast a circle, if they're doing it properly, I have a clairaudient sensation that occurs. I hear almost like a tinnitus.
Right.
And if I don't hear that, I'm like, okay, well, like, let's go through this again. Let's see if there's something energetically within you that you were missing in that until we get it correct.
Mm.
So it's sort of like I'm trying to not put the cart in front of the horse, which I feel like a lot of books in the last like 20 years have done.
Mm. It's so interesting. And if I'd actually never kind of thought of them being so separate before, but I think you're right in terms of like recent approaches. That is true, and I really like what you talked about. I haven't finished it yet, but about many people who are psychics are basically witches, but they wouldn't ever call themselves that. And they, may be doing that kind of work, but they wouldn't see it that way, and perhaps like vice versa. And it's lovely to actually bring those things together.
Yeah, I see magic and psychic ability as two sides of the same coin. So I see psychic ability as receiving, perceiving energetic information, right? And then magic is that projection of it, that manipulation of it. At least for me, when you boil everything down, like the myriad of traditions throughout all of history in different cultures, that's essentially the foundations of it. So for me, for example, like I would consider Reiki to be magic because you're
Mm-hmm.
channeling energy out. And
Mm,
a lot of people who do engage in Reiki also start to open their psychic senses as well.
yeah.
And there's kind of a compatibility with that. And I think that's true with any sort of magical path. I liken it to, let me throw out an example. So it's sort of like if you're painting, right? You can do a better job painting if you can actually see what you're working with, right? Or our
Mm,
conversation that we're having right now, it's a lot easier if we can both hear each other and we can both speak to each other and it's not just
yeah,
one way.
yeah, totally. um I'm come from a Reiki background, actually, so it makes absolute sense to me. Um, and an eclectic witch as well. So I'm very kind of always been very instinctive, and sort of feelings based on the whole thing. Anyway, that's just me. But that makes total. All the experiences I've had, doing Reiki is unbelievable. It's definitely helped me in that way.
Right.
So
And a lot of people find with Reiki, like if you look at Reiki in the last like 10 or 20 years, like they discovered like, oh, we can use Reiki for more than just people, more
yeah.
than just healing, and like those little things like using like choku rei on a wall or on an object or something like that. Like that's not too different from the
Mm.
stuff that we do in witchcraft.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, it's less bells and whistles, but yeah, it's essentially kind of. So, and you can be very, as you say, very creative with it if you think about outside the box, um, which I love. Uh, so, how did you come to become a psychic reader in the first place, Matt?
Um, I don't know. you know,
It just
um,
happened.
I've always been like kind of that weird kid. I even talk about in my book how I believe that kids are more psychic and more magical, and I kind of explain why, involving child development and brainwaves and like societal conditionings. But I was that kid that like was always making like mud potions with leaves, and I always had my imaginary friends, and I would start saying things that made people uncomfortable.
Mm,
So like, especially the adults. So if the adult was like saying something, I'd be like, oh no, that's not true. Cause like X, Y, and Z, that they were trying to hide.
oh,
Or when my grandmother passed, she passed when I was really young. I was like maybe like 2 years old.
mm,
But my grandma was one of my imaginary friends. And I would start saying things that like, there's no
okay.
way I could have known. That kind of freaked out my guardians.
Yeah,
So
amazing. Grandma told you.
yeah, so it was just sort of like a journey from there. Like I was raised when I was really young by my grandparents, my grandfather, and my step grandmother. And they were very, very religious, very, very strict religious. And somehow when I was like maybe like 8 years old, I saw the movie The Craft on TV. Like I
Oh, you
sat
were very young to see that. My goodness.
yeah, yeah, I'm a baby. Um,
No, I mean,
and
at eight o'clock, at, at age 8, surely you shouldn't have been watching that.
yeah. Well, for me, it was like a religious experience because
Mm,
obviously it's Hollywood and it's not realistic at all. But in a sense, it is realistic. It was the
mm,
first I had seen people engaging in magic that was presented as like anyone could do it, like a modern thing.
mm.
So I went on like this quest to learn more, so I went to my elementary school library and I started getting every book I could on witches, right, to try to like figure out how can I do this, because I'm young. And that didn't turn up a lot of results, as you could
Mm,
imagine in
mm,
elementary school. school library.
Yeah.
But there was a Time Life book that you couldn't check out that was on different topics. And one of them was witchcraft. And it went through like folklore and mythology, but in the very back, it had this little thing about modern day witchcraft.
Oh.
And I discovered the word Wicca.
Mm-hmm.
And saw like modern people doing it, like Maxine Sanders and like, the big names in that book. So this was about the time that like computers were being integrated into schools. So, I went onto like my Angel Fire or Netscape Navigator, and searched in Wicca and then found that like, oh, there's books on this you can get. So
Yeah.
then I was on a mission to try to buy the books from the mall, and they wouldn't sell them to me. It was, times have changed so drastically, but it was like, you
Yeah.
need a guardian. And
Yeah. Yeah.
eventually I got it. And then from there, it's been like a lifelong thing. Psychic ability is something that I've always wanted to sort of develop and understand more because of my own experiences. And just sort of through like synchronistic happenstance, I ended up being a professional psychic.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's hard to say like how did I become psychic, especially since I believe everyone is psychic. It's just a matter of opening yourself up to that, giving yourself a permission slip and putting the work into it to develop it.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Because I've heard people say, and I've probably said about like about somebody having either the gift for being psychic but also things like being a great artist, like, oh, you're just great at that. But I also know that that's rubbish, because I'm a writer, for instance. I didn't just like wake up one morning and become a halfway decent, well, like, reasonable writer. It's thousands of hours.
Yeah.
It's for anything. And actually, so as you say, psychic skills are no different, really.
Absolutely. I say something similar in the book. I don't, I mean, I don't know which ones I used in the book. It's been like like over a year since I wrote it. But what I often compare it to is art, like you said,
Mm.
or athletic skill. Some people are naturally athletic, some people are naturally artistic, but you can also learn those things. And if you're naturally artistic and you don't get formal training, you're still kind of hindering yourself. But anyone can get formal training and paint a beautiful picture. I had a client that I used to see regularly. It was one of my better clients when I was doing readings in Salem, and she kept talking about like, oh, your gift, you're so gifted. And it kind of like it was a compliment, but on one point I was like, this isn't a gift. Like, this is something I've had to put hours and hours
Mm.
of work and development into it, and like you could do it too. She's like, no, it's a gift. And I'm like, okay, well, I have a workshop on Friday about awakening your senses, so come to it. So she came to it, and then like, long story short, she's now a professional psychic, so it
Yeah.
just proves my point that like anyone can do it. It's just a matter of putting the work in, and then also learning how your mind works. What are you more predispositioned to? You see a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm clairvoyant, but I'm not like clairaudient, or I'm not clairtangent. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think we can be predisposed to be something stronger, but all of
Mm-mm.
those can be developed.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. Um, when I was reading that bit, I was thinking, which one am I best at there? And I think, yeah. And then I was thinking some of those seemed very inaccessible,
Mhm,
um, like taste, for
mhm.
instance. But there's no reason for that. I think that's just my preconception.
Did you get to the Black Rose exercise?
I have not.
Okay, see, so there's an exercise that'll show you which ones you're strong at and which
Okay,
ones you're weaker at.
there we go.
Uh, and it's just some people we're just wired a little bit differently, and people who teach like traditional education understand this. Some people are auditory learners, some
Yeah.
people are kinesthetic learners.
Mm,
So it's all about figuring out how you're wired and then working from there, using that as your sort of strength, but also not ignoring the other forms of information that you can get.
mm, mm. So, your book has been incredibly, it's very, very well received, hasn't it? And it's a big bestseller. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that's because maybe something to do with the fact that there is this desire out there to be melding these two subjects together? And
I think so. I mean, and like I said, part of it is, a lot of the psychic development books don't have a lot of exercises. It's not a lot of how to. There was one book that I actually had finished, and I was like, I need to write my own book, because it felt like the whole time they were just trying to prove to the reader that they were psychic.
oh,
It
right.
didn't really do anything other than like, oh, here's a chakra meditation, here's a meditation to open up to your guides. But it wasn't like any of the training I've had. I've trained with several different, not just witchcraft, but psychics,
Mm.
and then the combination of the two. Uh,
Mm.
so I also wanted to present something that could empower everyone, because I do believe that both the ability to manipulate energy and to perceive energy is inherent in every human being. So I wanted to present something that was not denominational. It's not a certain religion. It's not a certain path of magic or spirituality, but you can then apply whatever you believe into it. Uh,
Mm.
so I think that has been really well received. The idea that you don't have to be like a Gardnerian Wiccan or this tradition or that path. You can be an atheist witch. You can be a Christian that wants to develop it. Because in my honest opinion, it's all leading to the same place anyways. And I know that's like super hippie new age to believe, but I do believe all paths are leading to the same thing.
Yeah, that's okay. I think, we're doing a magical people interview. I think we're allowed to be new age hippies. It's okay. That's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, so I was going to ask you, Matt, what does I like to ask everyone this because I think it's quite interesting for viewers, is what your magical practice looks like, but particularly make on like a daily, everyday level. So what would be like a normal day for you?
Okay. So it kind of shifts and varies based on what I'm studying, because I'm eternally learning. Like that's my thing, is I want to keep doing things. So right now I'm sort of like ending sort of thelemic
Okay.
basics.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and I will replace whatever I'm learning with what I'm doing. So instead of doing like a lesser banishing pentagram ritual, I was doing the star ruby because that's what
Mm.
they do. But I do have essentially like staples that I do throughout the
Mm-hmm.
day. So I particularly work with Hecate.
Mm-hmm.
That is my deity that I have been devoted to for several years. So in the morning, I'll light a candle and I'll essentially pray. To simplify it, I'll pray based on what day of the week it is, incorporating that planetary energy. So
Okay.
today is Saturday, so it would all be about like saturnal things, like boundaries and protection, stuff of that
Okay.
nature.
Yeah. Oh.
Um, so those are the things that I'd be asking for. I tend to do an exercise to banish and cleanse in general, like I was saying, like lesser banishing ritual of the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
pentagram sort of thing. But it's not always consistently the same technique that I'll use. I try to spend time meditating every day. So that's like the bare minimum of what I will do daily.
Mm.
Um, but I am doing magic all the time, so it just depends on like what I'm doing. Am I casting a spell? Am I just sort of sending someone energy? um it switches up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I'm interested about your daily um sort of planetary dedications in that way,
Mhm.
um, which makes so. Could you say a little bit more about that for somebody who might not understand particularly what
Okay.
that is?
So this is something that I explain kind of like further in the book, because I essentially like I create a foundation and then I slowly build on it, because we want that solid foundation. But I talk about planetary energy. So to put it in sort of the cleanest, tidiest way to explain it is that there's this idea that has been ingrained in magic for a very long time, that there are 7 primary energetic archetypes that are based on the planets. And that goes into like, that's astral energy, essentially. Astral relates to the stars, the planets, stuff of that nature. And so each of these has a different current of energy that is specific to itself. So witches work with correspondences. So correspondences, essentially, like in its tiniest, simplest form, is essentially currents of power that have a certain like flavor, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So every day of the week is named after a deity that is based on that planetary energy. So like Saturday, Saturn,
Mm-hmm.
Monday, the moon, so on and so forth. So it's been believed for a very long time that those specific days have that current even stronger. So while you don't have to work with correspondences or planetary energy, plugging into it is going to make it stronger. It's like amplifying that energetic signature. So it's going to be more auspicious if you work magic that relates to the day, but also we believe in something called planetary hours. So every hour is ruled by a different planet, and that changes based on where you are and what day
Mm-hmm.
of the year it is. As well as the moon. Like everything is all about trying to sort of align ourselves with the different rhythms of nature and the universe so that we can work with it. And that makes our magic smoother, easier, more effective. That doesn't mean that you can't do love magic, for example, on Saturday, which is all about restrictions and boundaries and protection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just that if you do it on Friday, which is ruled by Venus, you're going to have better success with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I incorporate that into my spiritual practice with my spiritual beliefs by working with the goddess that is my matron, by, just saying, I'm not going to reveal like my actual prayers because that's actually being reserved for a future project.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, like on this day that is ruled by da da da, I ask for these things and I'm grateful for these things, and essentially that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in my practice, coming from a very kind of paganish background with my spirituality, prayer is a big thing. Prayer is just essentially communicating with something, in my opinion. I
Mm-hmm.
even see mediumship as prayer, and a lot of spiritualists will even talk about it in those sort of senses. I don't see it as like groveling before something, or
No,
how
it's a
some of,
communication thing. Yeah. Hmm. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
oh,
I've just never thought of it as groveling at all. Or I suppose perhaps sometimes it's in supplication too could be viewed in that way. But yeah. Um, and I was going to ask you if how you talked about that your matron goddess is Hecate, very
Mhm,
popular with witches,
mhm.
and a couple of my other interviewees have also been devotees of Hecate as well. But how did you come to her, and yeah, how did that work for you?
So that is a long story as well. None of these things are like super clear cut things.
Yeah, yeah.
Essentially, I started having experiences, visions. I astral project a lot. I started by just spontaneously astral projecting and being like,
Mm,
I need to learn how to control this.
mm,
But I've had a lot of dreams, visionary experiences, and astral projections with a certain entity, and I didn't know what the entity was. Like,
mm,
I first thought, well, maybe this is the Morrigan, which
mm.
often when either approaches you, if there aren't clear signs, it can seem like it's one or the other.
Yeah.
But slowly it started revealing itself as like, oh no, this is, clear symbols like torches and
Hmm.
stuff of that nature. I've had a lot of very personal experiences with her that are a little bit difficult to talk to people about, just because it is so personal and it is
Mm,
so profound. But essentially for me, it's the goddess of witchcraft, right? And it's the goddess of witchcraft because she has such a liminal and such a transitional energy that governs like everything in from ancient myths to the Chaldean oracles. Um, and it's interesting because their influence is on everything. So like the Chaldean oracles and Neoplatonism influenced the Catholic Church tremendously, you know? So it, it's she's kind of hard to escape if she has chosen
Yeah.
you. And I hate the word chosen because I don't know if it's necessarily that. But you know, I don't know. I would have to go through my journal entries and like, you know, pinpoint like, oh, I had this experience, I had that experience, stuff of that nature. But it is probably the most rewarding spirit contact that I've had in my life.
Mm,
So
mm,
it's something that I keep feeding energy into and keep devoting myself to.
mm. I know that a good friend of mine has not worked a lot with the Morrigan and not just Morrigan, other goddesses too. But she says whenever she kind of has that connection with the Morrigan, she either she's had visions of or just the feeling of like being poked with a spear, like you know, because very powerful, obviously kind of quite warlike goddess in some elements. But I think lots of people would identify with that experience of sort of chosen or just having a very strong connection, as you
Right.
say, in different ways and dreams uh, and awake.
Right.
Yeah, so I think I'm always interested to know how that's come about for people. Um, okay, so I like to ask everybody as well, Matt, what are your maxims for living life? No pressure.
Ooh. Um,
Or some Matt wisdom.
Oh man, wisdom. That's an intense word. Um, you know, I am a big advocate of positive thinking. You know, and I know there's a lot of discussion about toxic positivity. And I do think that can definitely be a thing. You know, if you start using positivity as like um a way to berate yourself or feeling lesser than for not feeling human emotions. But I
Mm,
do believe that there is something to say about the idea of maintaining a certain vibrational energy, fixing your mind on a goal. You know, and I think that's again at the heart of magic. You know, those are things that you do when you're casting magic and what I talk about in my book. Um, you know, I am a big proponent of imagination and being very imaginative, but also learning how to discern um, delusion or projection,
mhm,
or just like the random mind, you know, creations versus actually like perceiving and energetically working with things. Um, I also, you know, that's why I do a lot of book reviews and I'm very supportive of people in my community. And that's because I am very big on this idea of positive thinking. You know, of course, there's books I don't like. Of course, there's people that I, you know, want people to avoid, but I have found it's a lot healthier for the whole community to instead point to things that I think are beneficial,
mm,
you know,
mhm,
instead of like focusing on work that is questionable or the person is questionable, you know, why even give them that energy and attention when you can just divert that to something more positive?
mhm,
And that sort of philosophy of just trying to um, redirect things into a positive fashion while still not, you know, denying yourself the human experience, I think has been very powerful for me in my life and manifesting things.
mm.
I don't
That's
know if that answers your question.
No, that's a great general maxim for living life. Absolutely, very good advice. Yeah, I think it's a really I think that's a really difficult question. I would hate to be asked it myself. Um, we have to. I'm going to show you a book again. Just I'm going to put links underneath the video for people watching. But this is your book again. The very lovely cover. It's very modern as well, which is nice. So Psychic Witch, and it's from Llewellyn Publishers. Um, and Llewellyn, I think my first book on Wicca in the 90s was a Llewellyn. It was I don't know if you, Big Blue Book, Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft, that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, it's funny. I'm actually in the Buckland Museum now.
Oh, are
Um,
you?
yeah, yeah, they reached out to me and they wanted me to donate something to them, which is like huge because Raymond Buckland's, like, it started as his personal collection
Okay.
that just sort of like grew, you know, because he was collecting stuff from like Gerald Gardner and Crowley, you know, because he was like there, you know, at least the tail end of that to be able to get those things. So they contacted me because they were like, you know, you, other than the Big Blue Book, your book is our top seller. So
Amazing.
I made spirit boards with my roommate Chaz Bogan, who does those for his company Carnivalia. And I made a limited release of them and I donated the first one to them. So totally tangential from the whole thing, but like, it's such like a huge, like, oh my God, like my work is in the same room as like legends. So
Yeah.
I sent them like a signed copy of my proof of my book, the uncorrected one. And sorry, I'm just,
No, that's very
it's one of those
exciting.
things where it's like, this is my life. Like, this is, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the Rock and
amazing.
Roll Hall of Fame, isn't it? But for witches.
Sort of, yeah. Like the US version, like I
Yeah.
think because there's one in the UK too, right?
Yeah, it's in Cornwall, the
Yeah.
Boscastle, the Witchcraft
Mhm.
Museum. It's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, I want
Um,
to go there.
oh, do. I'll go with
Yeah.
you. It'd be lovely.
Once the plague is over, like I'm,
Oh my God. I know we're all going to travel so much and just do everything. We'll be just exhausted. No, it's a really great museum, and oh, it's got some really fascinating stuff in it. And they've got a really nice archive that you can borrow things from,
oh,
should you want to, and go and like do research there and things. Um, okay. Amazing. Well, I mean, I usually ask people, Matt, is there like a book or a resource that you would like to recommend to people? I think it should be your book because, but I mean, is there anything else that you would think really recommend to people to read or to watch?
so I was really big into citing my sources in the book because that's another thing I've started seeing books on witchcraft sort of getting away from, you know. And part of the reason I did that is because, like you were saying, your first book was Raymond Buckland. I discovered Raymond Buckland because my very first book was Silver Ravenwolf. And she did the same thing where she talks about other people and their work. And that gave me like breadcrumbs to learn more, you know, and one of them was Raymond Buckland. So
Mhm.
I went and I looked up who is Raymond Buckland. So I wanted to do the same thing. So I have a lot of books that I reference, including my bibliography. The most influential on me in my craft that if you resonate with my work that I would recommend would be the work of Devin Hunter, the work of Christopher Penzac, and the work of Ivo Dominguez Jr. Like, I think those three are probably my strongest, gonna resonate. If you liked my
Mhm.
book, you'll like
Mhm.
those.
Excellent. Okay, no, that's really great. It's always nice to have lots of recommendations. Amazing. Well, thank you, Matt. This has been such a great chat, and just
Oh,
like a
thank you.
just the very top of what could be several other really fascinating conversations. But it's a good intro to you. I would recommend everyone to go and buy your book. And if they're in the States and after the plague, they can probably go and find you doing events and things too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a whole tour lined up for my book, and it was released right
Uh,
as the pandemic happened. So like
oh,
all of that was canceled.
yeah.
Um, but you know, I have been very blessed to be able to do a lot of virtual stuff. And I'm so looking forward to being on the ground again and getting to meet people because that's my favorite part is like actually meeting people and actually like talking to them, you know, and learning about their practice and who they are. So yeah, if you go to my website, you know, there's a newsletter thing if you're interested in ever um, finding out what events I'm doing. And hopefully I'm trying to get things in motion to eventually get like a UK tour going on so I can
Ooh.
meet all the lovely people across the ocean. Uh,
Amazing. Okay. Oh, that would be lovely. And actually, so well, I'm going to end in a minute, but actually, it's interesting that this came out just before the lockdown and coronavirus, because I mean, it's a great shame for any book that's come out during that time. However, one would also think because this is a book about kind of going inside, this
right.
is what we've all been doing over the past year. So in a way, it bizarrely came out at quite a strangely appropriate time.
Yeah. And, I had released it based on astrology, like it was the most auspicious time to release it. Of
Mm,
course, I don't know why, other than, I don't, like I didn't know why it would be so auspicious other than, the planetary correspondences being correct.
mm,
But yeah, I think, because a lot of it is going inward, and it is, there's a lot of healing in it as well.
mm,
And I think that's something that has been very necessary within not just this last year, but like the last couple of years, like everywhere has
mhm,
been really intense, like energetically and emotionally and politically. So yeah, it just seemed to be auspicious.
mhm.
We'll
Well,
call it luck.
yeah, well, whatever it was, it's worked for you, so that's really good. Well, Matt, thank you. It's been a joy,
Oh,
and
thank you.
take care. Lots of love.
Bye.